to see. And you may be familiar with some of the campaign maps that we produced to illustrate really what was going on at the beginning. It took us a while to get the data and then get the design and put this map out. But what we discovered, and we knew anyway, but this has proved so helpful in visualizing it, is that despite NICE guidelines being endorsed, including in Northern Ireland, those NICE guidelines about what should be happening with community specialist services were effectively sitting on shelves. And what we did with this map was shine a spotlight to show where in the UK women could access specialist community services if they needed it and where they couldn't. And it was pretty shocking. I mean, if we start with the positive, the green shows where there were specialist perinatal mental health services. And that is positive, because if we did a map of another country in the world, it probably wouldn't have much green on. So in the UK, we've really pioneered what is possible. And those green areas in England, Scotland, you can trace all of them back to a particular perinatal psychiatrist that really championed having these services. So that's a positive. The red, no service at all. And the amber is there's something, but it falls short of nationally recognised guidelines. After a bit of time campaigning and various things that helped us get the attention of ministers particularly, we started to see funding being pledged and rolled out, particularly in England and Wales. And you start to see more green. In Wales, we're still not there with getting services to the national agreed standard apart from outside Cardiff, but you see even some movement there. I'm not going to say anything about Northern Ireland at the moment. We'll come back to that, but it speaks for itself, even though I know things are rapidly progressing now. And Scotland, yeah, maybe started in a better place, but not loads of movement. By the time we did the most recent map, it feels a bit of a cop-out, but actually COVID reared its head just before we were about to cross-check all the data. So this is a massive job, particularly now that, I'm not complaining, but particularly now that England has rolled out so many services. In the beginning, it's quite a quick job to work out whether you have enough services or any services, whereas now in England, all areas of England have the funding to have a specialist community service. Not all of them have got their workforce in place. So what we were measuring with this is, are there actual services on the ground? And we know that at least 80% of those areas, there are services on the ground meeting green criteria, which is amazing. We didn't put it out as a total green map because we weren't able to cross-check, go back to services to just double check, because we didn't want to be obviously bothering health services at a time that they were dealing with a pandemic. At the same time, we wanted to get this map out, particularly to show in the devolved nations what needs to shift, as well as celebrate what's happened in England. So if we go back to looking at Northern Ireland specifically, I know it's a much happier tale now, but we haven't updated on maps yet. So on the left, you'll see not a lot of change, as you know, no special services apart from one area of Belfast, but we are very confident with the funding announced and the services coming on board now that the next iteration of the map, fingers crossed, will show a green map for Northern Ireland, which is just absolutely incredible and will totally go beyond Wales, Scotland, and at this rate, England, because we can't get the data in to cross-check it fast enough. So Northern Ireland is going to look fantastic. Mother and baby units is less of a rosy picture at the moment, although I'm confident from what I'm hearing from colleagues in Northern Ireland that will shift too. We need a mother and baby unit in Northern Ireland. That map on the right shows where there are mother and baby units in the UK. The first phase of the campaign, we were able to secure 4 new mother and baby units in England. We now have an interim mother and baby unit in Wales, and Scotland started it off with 2 mother and baby units. But Northern Ireland, we look forward to celebrating when the announcement comes that we need a mother and baby unit clearly in Northern Ireland. So the next phase is really looking at what else is needed. You know, I know, despite the fantastic achievements and despite in Northern Ireland now having the funding in place to have specialist community services, and we must celebrate that, on its own, it will not meet the needs for all women and families. We know that around 80% of women that will have a perinatal mental health problem will not meet the threshold for those community teams, and they need support. We also know that of the women that do meet the threshold and need the support of those community teams, they're not going to just rock up there. They need to be identified and referred by others before they get there, and also supported on their discharge by others in the community. So the next stage of the campaign, we're delighted that the lottery has come on board to take this campaign, if you like, to the next level. We're going to include working on specialist perinatal mental health services, because as we've just seen, it isn't completely job done yet. But we're also going to work collaboratively with those that can make change happen for those changes to other parts of the health and social care system that are needed. Now, we're not able to, in the case of specialist services, we were able to go to NICE guidelines, take them off the shelf and say, right, this is what it looks like, this is what we need. Calling for change across health and social care system is less contained in one place. So before I give you a flavour of what the next phase of the campaign is going to look like for us, again with Lindsay's support, because I can't see the responses, I'd really love to know from those of you in this virtual room, if you were going to call for, hope to see a change beyond specialist services. So imagine the specialist services are all in place. Northern Ireland map is green, you've got your mother and baby unit, and the workforce is happy, everything's great. There's a journey there. But what else would make the biggest difference for women and families in Northern Ireland? So you can do your top one or your top three, but where would you start in making sure that women and families have what they need and that no woman falls through the gaps? You've got a magic wand. What would you change tomorrow if you could? Your number one or your top three?
So we have one already coming in here to the chat. Emily, would you like me to start reading them out?
Yes, please. That'd be wonderful.
So we have more investment in community and voluntary grassroots organisations. We have infant mental health teams to focus on bonding and attachment. Those are our two answers so far, and we'll wait and see. I'm sure others are typing away. Community peer support groups and promoting family mental health, more specialised parent and infant services, mental health support at antenatal clinics, education of current service providers so no one slips through the nets, e.g. ambulance, GPs, community groups, proper funding for mums and dad who present with mild to moderate presentations who don't meet the criteria for the specialist services, and whole family approaches, more counselling and family support for neonatal families. There's loads coming in, so I'm trying to read. Training for GPs, specialist health visitors, ACEs inclusion from the start, investment in art therapies, support via early year services, more education in GP practices and community referrals. Communication between all organisations is vital so that sharing knowledge can happen. Change of attitude with clinicians in some cases. Somebody suggested more on TV, and I guess that means in the media to raise awareness. Sorry, now some of them have come in very quickly, so I haven't managed to read every single one of them out, but that hopefully gives you a good flavour of what people are getting in.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Lindsay, for pulling that together. So what a vision. Wouldn't that be great? And doesn't that just illustrate that even with a green map, hopefully in Northern Ireland and the mother and baby unit, we can't pack up, that this work needs to carry on, because there's so much more that needs to be done. Now, at the Alliance, as staff and with our members, we've gone through a similar exercise. What does it mean to ensure that all the support and services are in place for women and families? And what I'm going to share with you is draft. It's sitting with a design agency, and by the end of June, the plan is that we will go live with this, and it will be one of the assets of the new campaign phase. But we've looked at trying to break down particularly with services, what services to the appropriate levels would need to be in place. Now, there'll be cross-cutting themes in there around, and you've picked up on some of them around training, communication between those services. But if we go back to what the advice from Comic Relief right at the beginning was, we need to be focused, and as a campaign, we need to focus on certain things. And we've come up with this grid, which feels an achievement in itself, actually. If you remember, I was saying that we can't just go to NICE and say, well, this is what a perinatal mental health care system looks like. But women and families at the centre. You'll see in the top left, of course, the specialist services are there, but also in that column, we've got health visiting, maternity. You mentioned many of these things: voluntary and community support there, parent infant, primary care, mental health services, child and family social services. Then all around, you've got public health. I mean, some people have suggested then all around that, you've got society and how child-friendly, parent-friendly it is as a society. So in terms of the next phase of the campaign, the first thing is defining this and calling for this, and coming up with a striking visual and fresh branding that can be as memorable, as in your face as the maps are, but that brings this thing definition to life. Also really important for us is around making sure in our next campaign phase that the voices of those mums, dads with lived experience are as representative as possible of all women and families in the UK. And we've commissioned and we will be launching a new economic report. Some of you will remember we did an economic report showing the cost of perinatal mental health problems if not addressed. And we will be doing a new report to bring out why these things are really important. We will also, we will call for all of this, but we will also retain focus. So we will want all of it, but we are very likely to start calling for tangible things that need to happen in health visiting and maternity, because we think that's the next catalyst for all the changes that are needed, as well as, and I would really welcome thoughts on this either now or if we run out of time later, how we demonstrate the key role that the voluntary and community support services play, particularly when there isn't a single voluntary community sector organisation. So how do we capture that? In Northern Ireland, alongside this, we're not dropping specialist services. That has to turn green. We need a mother and baby unit. We also need to increasingly, as an alliance, find ways to sustain this work beyond large grants. So I know all of us are scrabbling around for money, but we will need to work with colleagues in Northern Ireland to how can we continue to employ, fund a campaign coordinator in Northern Ireland. So Lindsay, how much time have I got?
Sorry, I'm just checking my schedule. We probably have about 5 minutes left before the next session is due to start. So it's up to you whether you'd like to continue. I don't see any questions at the minute in the Q&A. So if unless those are coming in, there's lots of chat which you'll probably want to download and keep, but there isn't any specific questions. So if you want to continue on for a few more minutes, that's fine.
That's fine. I mean, what I was planning to do was just also pause to think about COVID, because clearly all of these plans are not happening in a vacuum and we're all impacted by that. So unless there's a burning question, I can just give you a flavour. Some of you will have seen at the Alliance, we commissioned a report to look at the impact of COVID on maternal mental health. If you haven't seen that, I would urge you to go and look at that. There's a link there because I think it will help you, all of us in our work, because clearly the world has shifted and we don't really know the long-term impacts of this for many things. And I was going to show you. Oh, I think it's stopped me. So I was going to show you a little video of the findings of what we found. Maybe, Lindsay, just while I'm looking for that link, can I just ask for your support again? For those people in the virtual room, what do you see as the biggest impact? of COVID on maternal mental health now and possibly going into the future. And then I can just tell you what we discovered either in the video or I'll just tell you. So from your work, from your hunch, from what you see, what is the biggest impact? Is there an impact? Maybe there's no impact. Maybe it's all positive. Some people have suggested there are some positives, but what do you see?
Okay, so social isolation, quite actually a lot of isolation coming up from community and family, loneliness, fear of leaving home, again, isolation, lack of social support, fear, isolation and anxiety. Isolation, Emily, is coming up in almost every answer. Lack of peer support, poverty, lack of contact with others, parents not getting into the NNU wards, lonely experience for mothers, and the fact that fathers haven't been able to be present during appointments, isolation from the family unit, isolation from support groups and people struggling with anxiety and depression from that, people reporting that they've had no support and their experience has not matched their expectations of parenthood, which then brings guilt, fear of rejoining the real world, as we put it, issues of job loss and trauma, fear for the future, broken relationships, people worrying about baby's development, increased stress due to homeschooling, which has definitely been one, financial issues, babies being separated while partner in hospital with the baby, parents being separated by partner in hospital with baby, people possibly needed to shield during pregnancy, which adds again to that loneliness and increased anxiety, ever-changing public health, increased domestic violence. Hope that gives you a good flavour, Emily. And again, this chat is here so we can make sure that you get it, because there's lots and lots there that would be very helpful.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Lindsay. I always just feel very mindful and a bit emotional hearing that, also because we're all living through elements of this, and we don't know how long we're going to be living through it as it is now and what the longer term impacts are. So this report probably didn't have loads of surprises because you've touched on lots of those things already, but what it's done is it's pulled it together. It's a snapshot in time. It's pulled it together from the submissions of evidence that Centre for Mental Health that we commissioned to do this report were able to get, and particular surveys with voluntary community sector, as well as building on other people's surveys that had, and organisations that had happened, including Babies in Lockdown report. So I can't show you the video link, it's not working, but the top three things that were discovered, although you've touched on lots of it, is clearly there's been increased anxiety. There is increased mental health issues across the population, and particularly in this report, we were looking at maternal mental health. There is evidence around babies and infant mental health. The report references the Babies in Lockdown report for that. So increased anxiety, everyone's been impacted. Some people positively. There were some positive examples of people saying they were really enjoying a slower pace of life, having partners around more that maybe would have been working during their maternity leave. But across the board, increased anxiety, increased mental health needs, but not everyone has been impacted equally. So there in the report, you'll see a whole list of groups that have been disproportionately impacted. And the two that were pulled out particularly are women of colour and those from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And the other bit was around the impact on the services themselves. Health professionals are human and are part of this pandemic and are tired, many of them. And voluntary community sector have been able to really show what it is they're able to do quickly, often quicker than the statutory services, but they are stretched, and with the increased demand, how will they sustain themselves? And lots of fears about their sustainability and security, and we can't afford to lose those groups. So alongside those campaign next steps that we would have been doing anyway with the lottery funding, we increasingly need to be integrating these kind of calls. So the pandemic has shown us there were gaps already in perinatal mental health services. We've just seen that. Those services, where there are them, they need to be protected and enhanced. We don't want to lose them. And where there are pledges to have those services from governments, like mother and baby units, that needs to happen. We needed it before, and boy, do we need it now. And it needs to include voluntary sector funding. this is going to be a big one, I think, for us. What is the true level of demand for services? Did we really know what it was pre-COVID? We had research that showed prevalence around more than 1 in 10 women will have something akin to an illness or a problem. What is the prevalence now, and what is it going to be going forward? Now, when we've had conversations, particularly in England on this, with government, civil servants, there seems to be the idea that once the pandemic is over, we will go back to the pre-COVID level of need. We don't know. None of us have a crystal ball, but early indications are showing that the mental health of young women has really been knocked by this pandemic. Those women, many of them will go on to have babies. We don't know the long-term impact of this. So the other thing that we are calling for is more research into the ongoing impact, including for those that have been disproportionately impacted, the women of colour and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we've got a job, all of us. We need to get those services. That's our next campaign phase. But we also need to weave these messages in, because COVID, even if it disappeared tomorrow, wouldn't that be nice? The impact is going to go on. It's going to be trickle along. How and for how long, we don't know. So you'll see more information about the report and that link there. There's some contact details. Do follow us if that's your thing. Get in touch if you've got any ideas for any of this, and particularly in Northern Ireland. How do we expand the campaign whilst not drop the focus on mother and baby units? How do we sustain this work in Northern Ireland for the Alliance, as well as all the voluntary community sector organisations? Does anyone have any bright ideas? Do get in touch. And thank you, Lindsay. Thank you all. I can't see any of you. I wish I could. Thank you. I know I'm sure you're doing an enormous amount of work during this time to support women and families. And thank you for making the time to be here.
Thank you, Emily, so much for that presentation. And there are lots of comments still in the chats around those questions you asked, so we'll make sure that we get those to you. We really appreciate you joining us here today. And just to say that we do have Tom McEnany here in Northern Ireland, who is the Maternal Mental Health Coordinator here for the campaign, and Tom will be involved a little bit later on in another session. But Tom would love to also, I know, make contact with anybody who's heard what Emily has said here today, to signpost them to some of those sites, but also even to bring you into what's happening here on the ground in Northern Ireland. So if you are interested in hearing more about the Alliance, do go to those sites that Emily has said, do email, and we can make sure that we get you in touch with Tom to hear more of what's happening on the ground. But thank you so much, Emily, for joining us. To those who are attending, I'm going to finish off this session now. I'm speaking at the next session, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we've got to this point with the specialist services and what's happening next. So I will do my best to log off and log on very quickly. Do give me a minute or two, but huge thank you, Emily. And we know that the new chair of the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, Luciana, is joining us a little bit later as well. She's one of our keynotes in the afternoon, so everybody do tune in for that as well, because she'll be sharing more about the vision and the work of the Alliance going forward as well. So Emily, and
Lindsay, if I may, just to say, because Lindsay won't tell you, but Lindsay was our acting coordinator in Northern Ireland for a while and has been instrumental with her various hats in getting the services. And the Alliance, the campaign, has tentacles in many places and is many people coming together. And I think that's what we've learned and what we want to continue doing. And what you're doing today is, by coming together, collaborating, speaking with one voice, pooling our limited resources, we can actually get people's attention and we can see movement.
Absolutely. Amen, Emily. I completely agree. And thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and attendees, we will see you in the next session. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.